"You don't belong here. Get that thing out of my lobby before I have it removed." Marcus Holt said it without turning around. He was standing at the front desk of Harrington Capital Partners, 39th floor, Atlanta, Georgia, 7:51 in the morning. His back was to the elevator. His coffee was in his right hand. And the kid who had just stepped off the elevator was wearing a gray hoodie, dark jeans, and a pair of Nike Air Force Ones that had seen better days. 11 people in that lobby heard every word. The kid didn't move, he didn't flinch. He just stood there with a worn leather messenger bag over one shoulder and looked at Marcus Holt with the quietest pair of eyes you will ever see on a 23-year-old man. "My name is Jordan Ellis. I'm your new investment analytics intern." Marcus turned around slowly. He looked Jordan up and down the way you look at a piece of furniture you're thinking about returning to the store. His gaze stopped on the sneakers, then went back up to the hoodie. "Investment analytics." He said it like he was reading something off a restroom wall. "Since when do they let people off the street apply for investment analytics?" Jordan didn't answer that. His jaw shifted slightly. That was the only thing that moved. Marcus stepped closer. "Let me guess. Diversity hire. Quota fill. Am I right?" He turned to his assistant, a young woman named Claire Hensley, who was standing 2 feet away, holding a clipboard, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Tell HR, I need to have a conversation about their screening process." Whoever approved this clearly didn't look at the photo. Then he picked up his coffee cup, tipped it sideways over Jordan's messenger bag, and let the last 2 inches of dark roast pour out across the fabric. Slow. Deliberate. He watched it spread. "Now you look like you belong in the right department." He smiled. "Custodial is on 16, 11 people." Dead silence. Not one of them moved. But here's what no one in that lobby understood. That messenger bag with the coffee spreading across it had a small metal keychain clipped to the zipper. A single chess piece. A black king. Jordan's grandfather had given it to him on the day he graduated from Morehouse. His grandfather, who had built this company from a 2-room office on Peachtree Street 41 years ago. Nobody in that building knew that yet. And what happened next was going to change every single person in that room. Before we go back to what happened after the coffee hit the bag, you need to understand 2 things. You need to understand who Jordan Ellis was. And you need to understand who Marcus Holt was. Because this story only makes sense when you see both of them clearly. Jordan grew up in College Park, 10 miles south of downtown Atlanta. Not the version of College Park people talk about when they talk about gentrification. The version before that. A 2-bedroom house on Delow Drive, where the porch light was always on because his mother, Gloria, worked evening shifts at the hospital laundry and wanted Jordan to be able to find the door key without waking the neighbors. He woke up every morning at 5:30, not because he had to, because that was the only quiet time in the house where he could think. He'd sit at the kitchen table with a composition notebook and work through financial models he found in old textbooks from the public library on Welcome All Road. He was 14 the first time he built a discounted cash flow model by hand. He didn't know that's what it was called. He just knew the math made sense. His grandfather, Raymond Ellis, came to the kitchen most mornings at 6 blaff. Raymond Ellis was 67 years old. He wore the same style of brown cardigan every morning, different colors, same cut. He had the hands of a man who had carried things his whole life, heavy things. He would sit across from Jordan, pour 2 cups of coffee, and not say anything for a long time. Just sit there while Jordan worked through his models. Sometimes he'd point at a number. Sometimes he'd ask a question. Where did this assumption come from? What happens if the margin is wrong by 3 points? He never told Jordan what to do. He just sat there and asked questions until Jordan found the answer himself. What Jordan didn't know, not then, not until he was older, was that his grandfather was doing the exact same exercise at the exact same age on the exact same kind of composition paper. In 1983, Raymond Ellis had sat in a different kitchen and modeled the acquisition he was planning to make. His first acquisition. The one that became the foundation of Harrington Capital Partners. Raymond never talked about the money. He talked about the work. He talked about the thinking. He had given Jordan that keychain 3 weeks before the internship started. Black King. He held it out across the breakfast table and said, "The king doesn't run. He moves 1 square at a time, and he stays on the board." That was all. Jordan clipped it to his bag. He hadn't taken it off. Now Marcus Holt. Same city, completely different geography. Marcus Holt was 44 years old, Managing Director of Client Services at Harrington Capital Partners, 17 years with the firm. He had an office with a glass wall on the 39th floor and a view of the skyline that he kept a professional photographer on retainer to document every quarter. His suits were tailored on West Peachtree Street. His watch cost more than most people in his industry made in 3 months. Marcus had built his identity on one idea: that he could see talent, and more importantly, that he could identify who didn't have it. He called it instinct. His team called it something else, quietly, among themselves, in the break room on the 36th floor, when they were sure he wasn't within earshot. He had fired 3 analysts in the past 2 years for what he described as poor cultural fit. All 3 had filed complaints with HR. All 3 had been quietly settled. He had approved hiring decisions based on which school a candidate attended, what they looked like when they walked in the room, and whether their shoes were the right brand. He said these things out loud, in meetings, as though they were neutral observations about the world. He was never wrong about anything, not according to Marcus Holt, and the people around him had learned, over 17 years, that the most comfortable position was to agree with that assessment now. Back to the lobby. 7:53 in the morning. The coffee soaking into the leather of Jordan's messenger bag. The Black King keychain still clipped to the zipper, dark now wet. Jordan looked at the bag. Then he looked at Marcus. His voice didn't change. "Is the intern workspace on this floor?" Marcus blinked. He hadn't expected a question. He'd expected a reaction, embarrassment, an apology, maybe tears, definitely an exit. He got none of those things. He got a 23-year-old, standing straight with a wet bag and a question about workspace. Claire Hensley, standing to Marcus's right with her clipboard, pressed her lips together. She had been at this firm for 4 years. She had watched 3 analysts walk out of this building and never come back after similar interactions with Marcus Holt. She looked at Jordan. She opened her mouth. Then she looked at Marcus. Then she looked back at her clipboard. Down the hall. Last door on the right. She set it to the floor. "Thank you." Jordan walked down the hall. Marcus watched him go. Then he turned to Claire. "Get me whoever approved that hire. And find out why no one told me we were bringing in an intern who looks like he just got off a city bus." Claire wrote something on her clipboard. She didn't show it to anyone. The last door on the right was not a workspace. It was a conference overflow room that doubled as overflow storage. 2 folding chairs, a laminate table with a scratch running diagonally across it, a whiteboard with ghost marks from dry erase markers that had never fully been erased. No computer, no monitor, no network login card, no welcome kit. The other interns, 3 of them, Jordan had seen their photos in the offer letter email, were presumably in the main intern suite 2 floors down. He had walked past the suite on the way in and seen it through the glass. New desks, dual monitors, branded tote bags on the chairs, a welcome letter from senior leadership propped up in front of each keyboard. Jordan set his wet bag on the laminate table. He unzipped it, pulled out his laptop, a refurbished ThinkPad X1 he had bought 18 months ago for $340 off a graduate student at Georgia Tech who was upgrading. He opened it, connected to the visitor wireless network, because no one had given him the internal credentials, and pulled up the SEC Edgar database. Harrington Capital Partners had public filings going back to 2003. Jordan started with the most recent 10K, then the last 3 years of quarterly reports. He built a comparison model in a spreadsheet as he read, tracking revenue by practice area, client retention patterns, fee structure changes, operating cost ratios. By 9:30, he had identified 2 anomalies in the cost allocation methodology that didn't reconcile across reporting periods. By 11, he had a preliminary 9-page analysis with annotated citations from the filings. No one checked on him. No one brought him credentials. No one showed him where the bathroom was on 39. At 11:15, a man from the mailroom named Curtis, 58 years old, silver at his temples, paused outside the open door and looked in. He took in the room, the folding chairs, the ghost-marked whiteboard, the kid with the laptop who had clearly been set up in a supply closet. Curtis had worked in this building for 16 years. He recognized this arrangement immediately. He didn't say anything about that. He just said, "There's a coffee station by the elevator if you need it." Then he walked on. Jordan looked up from the screen and nodded. "Thank you, sir." Sir, Curtis stopped walking for half a second when he heard that, then he kept going. He thought about it for the rest of the day. Now here's what was happening on the other side of the floor. Marcus Holt had a 10-strategy meeting with the senior analyst team, 7 people around a glass table. Jordan's name was originally on the briefing roster because the intern program coordinator, a woman named Patricia Webb, had included all 4 interns on the distribution list. Marcus saw Jordan's name on the list before the meeting. He called Patricia directly. Take Ellis off the meeting roster. And the briefing notes. And the shared drive access. Patricia hesitated. The intern program guidelines say that Marcus, I know what the guidelines say. He's not a cultural fit. Handle it. Patricia didn't respond. She sat at her desk for 90 seconds after hanging up. Then she made a decision she would think about for months afterward. She removed Jordan from the list. She told herself she would address it later. There was no later. There was only the next decision and the one after that, and each one felt smaller than the last until the whole thing was buried under a series of small decisions that each seemed reasonable at the time. At noon, the other 3 interns walked past the overflow room on their way to a firm-sponsored lunch at a restaurant 3 blocks from the building. Jordan watched them pass through the gap in the door. He ate a sandwich he had packed, turkey and sharp cheddar on wheat, sitting at the laminate table with the scratch running across it. His phone buzzed. He picked it up, and for the first time since he had walked into the building 4 hours ago, something in his face changed. Not much, just enough. A small private expression that had nothing to do with where he was and everything to do with who had just texted him. He typed back, Day 1, fine, love you, Grandpa. Then he set the phone down and went back to the SEC filings. The contact in his phone was saved as Grandpa R, no company name, no title. No indication that the man on the other end of that message, Raymond Ellis, the man in the brown cardigan who had spent 40 years building Harrington Capital Partners from a 2-room office on Peachtree Street, was the firm's founder, majority shareholder, and the reason this building had the word Harrington on it at all. Nobody on the 39th floor knew that yet. And Marcus Holt was about to make his 3rd mistake of the day, which would turn out to be the one that cost him everything. At 2:30 that afternoon, word had moved quietly through the floor. The intern who had gotten coffee poured on his bag in the lobby that morning was still in the building, still in the overflow room, still working. Marcus heard it from Tyler Brooks, his junior analyst, who heard it from the receptionist, who heard it from Curtis in the mailroom, who hadn't said it as gossip. Curtis had said it as a simple statement of fact. The kid's still working, on his own laptop, been at it since 8. Tyler relayed it to Marcus with a smirk, because that was how Tyler survived in this office. He leaned in the doorway. He's building some kind of report. From the SEC filings. Marcus looked up from his monitor. He didn't like what he was hearing. He expected the problem to have solved itself. He had poured coffee on a man's bag and told him he belonged in the custodial department. That was supposed to be an ending, not a status update. He picked up his desk phone, dialed the 36th floor coordinator. Remove the Ellis intern from tomorrow's cohort presentation. I don't want him in the room. The coordinator started to say something about the program guidelines. Marcus didn't let her finish. She moved the name off the list. What happened next was the 2nd day. Jordan arrived at 7:44. Same hoodie, different shirt, same bag with the coffee stain still visible along the bottom seam. He had tried to clean it the night before. The stain had lightened, but not disappeared. He had not replaced the bag. He had clipped the Black King keychain back onto the zipper and walked in through the lobby the same way he had the day before. Marcus Holt was at the front desk again. He saw Jordan step off the elevator and went still for a moment. Then his face arranged itself into something deliberate. You're back. I'm scheduled to be here for 10 weeks. Jordan said it the way you state a fact in a spreadsheet. Marcus walked over slowly. He stopped close enough that it was uncomfortable. You know what I think about intern programs that don't screen properly? He spoke quietly, in the way that some people use quiet as a weapon. I think they're charity, and I don't run a charity. So let me make this clear for you. Nobody here wants you. Nobody here is going to help you. And whatever you're doing in that storage room on your little laptop is not going to change that. He waited. Jordan looked at him for a moment, then said, Is there a conference room available for a brief presentation? I have some analysis from the public filings I'd like to share with the portfolio team. The air in that lobby changed. 3 people nearby went very still. Marcus smiled slowly. The portfolio team. You want to present to the portfolio team. He turned to Claire, who had just arrived, still holding her clipboard. She was watching Jordan's face. Make sure security has his visitor clearance listed as temporary. Day-to-day basis. 1 complaint and it's revoked. Then he walked away. At 3 all that afternoon, something happened that Marcus had not planned for. A woman named Sandra Okonkwo, who had been a senior portfolio analyst at Harrington for 11 years, walked past the overflow room and slowed down. She had heard the lobby story the morning before from Curtis. She stopped in the doorway. Jordan looked up. You built something from the public filings? She said it without preamble. 9 pages. Preliminary. I found 2 cost allocation anomalies across the reporting periods. Sandra was quiet for a moment. She had found a cost allocation discrepancy herself 6 months ago and had flagged it in an internal memo that went nowhere. Can I see it? Jordan turned the laptop screen toward her. Sandra read for 4 minutes without saying a word. Then she said, Where did you train? Morehouse, and self-taught. Mostly. Who else has seen this? Nobody. Sandra looked at the annotated citations, then at the model structure, then at the kids sitting at a folding table in a room meant for boxes. Something moved across her face. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. She had been the only black woman in the analyst meeting for 6 of her 11 years. She knew what a deliberately broken chair looked like. She had sat in plenty. I'm going to forward your intern access credentials, she said. The real ones. Not visitor. She paused. And I'm going to CC Patricia Webb so it's documented. Jordan held her gaze. Thank you. She didn't answer. She walked back to her desk, opened her email, and did exactly what she said. Then she opened a separate email and wrote 3 sentences to Patricia Webb. I'm aware Jordan Ellis does not have internal system access and was not included in the cohort briefing roster. I'm correcting the access issue now. I want that discrepancy noted formally in the intern file. Patricia read the email twice. She forwarded it to HR and did not delete her copy. She was done making the small decisions. Now Marcus, that same afternoon, he did something that seemed, in the moment, like a manageable escalation. He called Tyler into his office and said, I want a reason to remove that intern from the program. Performance, attitude, anything, find me something. Tyler, who had been angling for a bonus review, nodded. He would regret that nod. What Marcus did not know was that Sandra had already sent Jordan's 9-page analysis to 2 members of the executive committee with a note that said, You should read this before the Thursday partner briefing. This is the work of your new analytics intern. One of those executive committee members was a man named Leonard Park, who had been at the firm for 22 years, and who had, over those years, developed a specific instinct for when something important was being ignored. He read the 9 pages. He read the annotated citations. He pulled up the SEC filings himself and checked the numbers. They held. He forwarded the analysis to the founding partner's office. He included 1 line of his own. This warrants your attention. The founding partner's office. Raymond Ellis. At 4:47 on the second afternoon, Raymond Ellis, 67 years old, brown cardigan, hands that had carried heavy things for a long time, walked off the elevator on the 39th floor. He had not been to this floor in 4 months. He had not called ahead. He walked past the front desk, nodded to the receptionist, turned down the hall. He stopped outside the last door on the right. Jordan looked up. Raymond Ellis walked into the overflow room and looked at the folding chairs. The scratch on the laminate table. The whiteboard with its ghost marks. The ThinkPad. The messenger bag with the coffee stain. He reached out and touched the Black King keychain. He stood there for a moment. Nothing moved on his face. But his jaw shifted in exactly the way Jordan's jaw shifted. Same angle, same quiet. The thing that moves when you are holding something very heavy very carefully. Show me what you built. He sat down in the second folding chair. Jordan turned the laptop. Raymond read for 6 minutes. He didn't say anything. His breathing was slow and even. On the 3rd page he stopped, pointed at the anomaly Jordan had identified. Let me see your source citation on this. Jordan had it open in a second tab. He turned the screen. Raymond read the citation. Then he looked at the model. Then back at the citation. He nodded once. Small nod. The kind that carries everything behind it without needing to say any of it. They sat there like that for a long time. No words. Just the hum of the floor's ventilation system and the late afternoon light coming through the window at the end of the hall, a window Jordan had not been close enough to see from the overflow room. What happened next took exactly 11 minutes. Raymond Ellis walked down the hall to Marcus Holt's office. He did not knock. He pushed the door open and stood in the frame. Marcus was on the phone. He looked up, registered an older black man in a cardigan, and held up one finger in the universal gesture of wait a moment. Raymond waited. He looked at the framed photo on Marcus's credenza. Marcus at a charity golf tournament. Marcus at a client dinner. Marcus shaking hands with someone who wasn't smiling as broadly as Marcus was. Marcus ended his call. He did not stand up. "Can I help you?" "I'm Raymond Ellis." And then Marcus Holt's brain did the thing brains do when information arrives in an order it was not prepared for. He processed the name. He processed the cardigan. He processed the office, the 39th floor, the way the receptionist had nodded to this man without stopping him, the way no one had asked him who he was there to see. The pieces moved into position one by one. "Raymond Ellis, I understand you have a new analytics intern." Marcus's mouth opened. Raymond continued, "My grandson, Jordan. He's been working in the supply room for 2 days on visitor Wi-Fi and no system access. He arrived on day 1 to a lobby where someone poured coffee on his bag and told him he belonged in the custodial department. He's been excluded from the cohort briefing, removed from the shared drive, and blocked from the partner presentation scheduled for Thursday." Raymond sat down in the chair across from Marcus's desk without being invited, and he built a 9-page analysis from the public SEC filings in 48 hours that Leonard Park just called me about directly. Marcus had not moved. He had the expression of a man standing in an open field who has just realized the sound he's been hearing is not thunder. Raymond put both hands flat on the desk. He didn't raise his voice. "I built this firm in 1983 from a 2-room office on Peachtree Street. I have run this building for 41 years. I have made a lot of decisions in those 41 years about who belongs here and who doesn't." He paused. "I don't make those decisions based on what someone's shoes look like." Marcus found his voice. "Sir, I want to explain. There was a misunderstanding about the intern placement, and I've been meaning to correct the access issues. We have high standards here, and I was ensuring that all interns were meeting program benchmarks before." Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You poured coffee on my grandson's bag and told him he belonged in custodial, in the lobby, in front of 11 people, on his first morning." Marcus did not answer that. "That is not a misunderstanding about benchmarks." Raymond stood up. "There will be a full review conducted by HR and the executive committee. I'm asking you to remain available for that process. I'd also ask you to stay off the 39th floor until the review is complete." Marcus stood up. His voice changed. "You can't do that. I have 17 years with this firm. I have built the client services division from the ground up. I have relationships with every major account on our books. You're going to remove me from my floor because of an intern placement dispute?" Raymond looked at him. He said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was even quieter than before. "I'm going to be honest with you, Marcus. I'm not removing you because of an intern placement dispute. I'm removing you because you looked at my grandson and decided in the first 30 seconds what kind of person he was. And then you spent 2 days doing everything in your power to make sure he couldn't prove you wrong." He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. "I've spent 41 years trying to build a firm where the work is what matters. Where sits at a kitchen table and teaches themselves to read a 10K at 14 years old has the same shot as someone whose father plays golf with the right people." He looked back at Marcus. "You've been dismantling that for 17 years and calling it high standards." He left the door open behind him. 11 people in that lobby had heard Marcus pour coffee on Jordan's bag 2 mornings ago. 40 people on the 39th floor were about to hear what happened next. Because glass offices and open floor plans don't keep sound as well as people think. The formal review took 9 business days. Sandra Okonkwo submitted a 4-page written statement. Patricia Webb submitted documented email records going back 8 months, showing a pattern of intern assignment anomalies specifically tied to the intern cohorts Marcus had approved. Curtis from the mailroom submitted a brief verbal account of what he had observed on the first morning. He stated it simply, professionally, without editorial. He was the first person the HR coordinator thanked when the review was complete. The 3 analysts who had filed complaints 2 years prior were contacted. 2 of them agreed to speak. What they described in detail over recorded calls was not a collection of isolated incidents. It was a system, a consistent, deliberate system for identifying people Marcus Holt had decided didn't belong and then engineering the conditions for their failure. HR did not need to be told what to do with that information. On the morning of the 9th day, Marcus Holt was called into a meeting on the 41st floor. He brought his lawyer. He had a prepared statement about his 17 years of contribution to the firm, his client relationships, the revenue he had generated, the team he had built. The statement ran to 6 pages. He was not asked to read it. He was informed that his employment was being terminated effective immediately, with severance consistent with the firm's standard separation agreement for managing directors, contingent on a standard non-disparagement clause and a formal settlement acknowledgement that included an expression of accountability for conduct outlined in the HR investigation report. Marcus rejected the settlement acknowledgement on the spot. He said he had done nothing wrong, that he had maintained standards, that the firm was making a mistake it would regret. His lawyer touched his arm. "Marcus, I'm not signing something that says I did anything wrong to that kid." His voice was flat and hard and very controlled. There was a pause in the room. Then the HR director said, quietly, "That's your right. If you'd like additional time to review with counsel, we can schedule a follow-up." Marcus stood up. He picked up his folder. He looked at the window, the Atlanta skyline, the view you can only get from 41 floors. He had been looking at that skyline for 17 years. He looked at it like he was memorizing it. Then he walked out. He did not sign the acknowledgement for 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, something happened that nobody had predicted, including Raymond Ellis, including Sandra, including Jordan. A former junior analyst, one of the 3 who had filed complaints, reached out to a journalist at the Atlanta Business Chronicle. The story ran on a Thursday morning. It was careful and factual. It quoted from the HR investigation summary, which was a public document by that point due to one of the settlement agreements. It described the pattern of intern assignment anomalies. It described the lobby incident. It described the cost allocation analysis that a 23-year-old had built on visitor Wi-Fi in a supply closet in 48 hours. It did not name Jordan's grandfather. By Friday evening, people who had worked in the building for years were talking about the story the way people talk about something they have been waiting for someone to say out loud. A former receptionist posted on LinkedIn. A former analyst posted on LinkedIn. 2 current employees, without identifying the firm by name, wrote about experiences that were recognizable to everyone who read them. Marcus Holt called Raymond Ellis on a Sunday morning. Raymond answered on the 3rd ring. Marcus said, "I want to understand why you didn't just fire me on the spot. Why the review process? Why the offer?" Raymond was quiet for a moment, because I've had 41 years to understand the difference between a person who is wrong and a person who is lost. He paused. "You're wrong about a lot of things, Marcus, but I don't know yet whether you're lost." Another pause. The settlement acknowledgement includes a requirement for an executive coaching engagement. Bias training, leadership recalibration, the full program. 6 months. Best people in the field. I'll cover the cost. "Why?" Marcus said again. "Because the people you pushed out of this building deserve someone to learn from what you did. And so do you. Whether you take that opportunity, or you spend the next decade telling yourself you were right, that's your choice." Marcus didn't say anything for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had something in it that hadn't been there in 17 years of performance reviews and client dinners and decisions about who belonged and who didn't. He said, "I heard about the analysis he built, the 9 pages, from the SEC filings." Raymond said, "Yes." Marcus said, "I didn't read it before. I should have read it." Raymond said, "Yes, you should have." The line was quiet. Then Marcus said, "I'll look at the coaching program." Raymond said, "Good. That's enough for today." 6 weeks after that phone call, Marcus Holt signed the settlement acknowledgement. He began the coaching engagement. He did not return to Harrington Capital Partners. He found a new position, a smaller firm, a smaller office, a smaller skyline. His first week there, he introduced himself to the intern who had just started and asked what projects she had been assigned. She had been given 3, all of them real. Jordan Ellis completed his internship. His performance evaluation was conducted by a three-person panel that included Sandra Okonkwo and Leonard Park. They knew his grandfather. They reviewed his work as though they didn't. He received the highest rating in the cohort and a full-time offer 2 weeks before graduation. His first project as a permanent employee was to co-chair a new internship integrity task force with Patricia Webb. They spent 4 months building a new onboarding framework. Equal workspace, equal access, equal credentials, day 1, no exceptions. A checklist verified and time-stamped by 2 separate department coordinators before the intern arrived. An anonymous reporting line managed by an outside firm, not HR, reporting directly to the executive committee. Jordan wrote the framework from memory, not because he had studied other frameworks, but because he knew exactly, in precise and specific detail, what it felt like when the framework didn't exist. On Jordan's first official morning as a full-time employee, he walked off the elevator on the 39th floor at 7:49. Curtis was pushing a mail cart toward the elevator bank. He saw Jordan step off. He stopped the cart. He held out his hand. Jordan shook it, firm, the way his grandfather had taught him. Curtis said, "Glad you're here." Jordan said, "Glad to be here, sir." Curtis laughed at that, a real laugh, the kind that sounds like something releasing. He pushed the cart past and disappeared around the corner. Jordan walked to his desk, a new desk, a window desk. He set his bag down, the messenger bag, coffee stain still faintly visible along the bottom seam, lighter now but not gone. He had never cleaned it past that point. He had kept the stain the way you keep a scar that taught you something true about the world. He unclipped the Black King from the zipper, set it on the desk beside his keyboard, looked at it for a moment. That evening, Raymond Ellis called. Jordan answered on the second ring. Raymond asked, "How was the first day?" Jordan said, "I had a window." Raymond was quiet. Then he said, "Your grandmother used to say, every morning you walk into a room, you get to decide whether you're the one who changes it or the one who lets it change you." Jordan didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "She was right." They stayed on the line for a little while after that, not talking. Just the sound of the city outside both their windows, the same city, different floors, the same Atlanta evening, falling across both of them the same way. This story is fiction. Jordan Ellis is not a real person. Raymond Ellis is not a real person. Harrington Capital Partners does not exist. But the lobby does. The supply closet does. The clipboard held downward does. The name taken off the distribution list does. The small decision that felt reasonable at the time, and the one after that, and the one after that, they are real, and they happen every day in buildings all over this country. According to the EEOC, more than 67,000 workplace discrimination charges are filed every year in the United States. And those are only the ones that reach a formal complaint. For every Jordan who stayed in that room and opened his laptop, there are hundreds who walked out that door and never came back. Not because they didn't have the work in them, because the room told them it didn't want the work. Marcus Holt didn't lose his career because Jordan was the founder's grandson. He lost it because he looked at a human being and decided in 30 seconds what that person was worth. And then he spent 2 days proving himself right by making sure the person had no chance to prove him wrong. That's not instinct. That's a mirror. And eventually, every mirror shows you the truth. So here is the question. And it's not about Jordan. It's not about Marcus. It's about you. The next time you are standing in that lobby and someone steps off that elevator and they are not what you expected, not what you pictured, not what you had already decided before they open their mouth, what do you do? What does the person next to you do? And what do you do about what the person next to you does? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story found you at the right moment, hit like so it finds someone else who needs it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe, because next week we are telling another story. One about what happens when the person everyone underestimated decides to stop being quiet. You do not want to miss it.